Mhm. Yes, Frank, Regina, we are live on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you very much for joining today, and we are really happy to have you. And let's wait a few minutes, just our viewers can join us, and then we will start our session.
Okay, okay.
So yes, it takes some time.
You want to share the screen? Is that what I do here?
Share screen.
Share screen.
Okay. Select window. Okay. 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 Selected. So okay. Allow. Okay.
Yes, our first followers join us. Good evening, dear friends, Bishkek American Center followers. Thank you very much for joining our session. We come back with our weekly virtual US state tours. And today we are going to Missouri State. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speakers today, Frank and his wife Regina. So Frank Popper, he is a documentary filmmaker, and last September he visited 6 American corners throughout Kyrgyzstan with his most recent film, Gentleman of Vision. And Regina taught English at high school and college, and now she is retired. Today we are really honored to have Frank and Regina to present their home state, Missouri. And dear friends, don't forget to ask your questions about Missouri State and leave your questions and comments under this video. And after the presentation, our guest speakers will answer them. So I think, Frank and Regina, it's your flows, your turn.
Okay. Real quick, Ada, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Oh, you
Yes.
can't see it. Okay. Okay. Good. All right. Okay. Well, Salam Dostor.
Dobry Vecher.
And I want to thank the U.S. Embassy in Bishkek for inviting us to come here. We really appreciate it. I wanted to say before we get started that we are not official representatives of the U.S. Embassy, Kyrgyz Republic. Opinions expressed are solely my own and my wife's, and do not express the views or the opinions of the U.S. Embassy, Kyrgyz Republic. So thank you, Aida. As you introduced me, my name is Frank Popper. I'm a documentary filmmaker based in St. Louis, and I visited the Kyrgyz Republic last September. You can see here, this was a picture that Cholpan took of us, a selfie with Cholpan and Egharim and myself the day that I arrived. And I spent quite a bit of time. I spent about a week in Kyrgyzstan. I visited the towns of Bishkek, Osh, Jalalabad, Naren, and Karakol. And I even got a little publicity while I was there. But my favorite dish of all was the ash liam pho. That was my favorite. But we're here to talk about Missouri today. And we'll begin by saying that this is St. Louis, where Regina and I live. And this is the Gateway Arch, which represents the gateway to the west, which Regina is going to explain to you. And that's the Mississippi River in front of us there. So I'll just tell you briefly that Missouri is a tribe of Native Americans that were part of the Sioux tribe, and their name means town of large canoes. So that's what the state means, town of large canoes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Regina.
Okay, so Missouri is right here in the middle of the United States map. The Mississippi River goes down all the way down here to New Orleans. And I'll tell you about how Missouri became part of the United States. Missouri is west of the Mississippi River, and it was part of the Louisiana Purchase. Click on the, go to, and here's the Mississippi River going around St. Louis down. And we'll be talking about the state of Missouri, more details in a minute. And go ahead to that. This is a map of the Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson purchased the territory from France. Napoleon needed money for his wars. The Louisiana Purchase expanded U.S. land to include New Orleans to the south, all the land west of the Mississippi, and over toward the Rocky Mountains, which would be in this area. Other northwestern areas were controlled by the native tribes near Canada. This would be Oregon and Washington State now. And the southern areas were controlled by Spain, the big part of California down through Texas. A year later, in 1904, Thomas Jefferson hired Lewis and Clark to travel up the Missouri River in hope of finding the Northwest Passage to the Pacific Ocean. So they traveled up the Missouri River, and they were hoping the Missouri River would go all the way to the ocean, but the Rocky Mountains were in the way. They depended on the Native Americans to eventually help them figure a way over to the Columbia River and over to the Pacific Ocean. They had never gone that far, and they did not know what they would find. They hoped to go along the rivers all the way to the ocean, but that did not happen. They had to cut through the Rockies. Their crew of 40 people departed from St. Louis area by boat and traveled up the Missouri River. They traveled for 18 months and almost 6,000 kilometers. They made daily journals and drawings. Lewis and Clark documented the tribes, the wildlife, and the geography along the way. They were told to represent the U.S. government and begin good relations with the native people along the way. One of the crew was a woman, Sacagawea, a Shoshone native who was married to one of the crew. Her knowledge of the land and her presence eased relations with tribes along the way. Without her, they may have been killed by tribes along the way.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about Mark Twain. Mark Twain is probably the most famous person to come from Missouri and one of the great writers of in all of America. He was from Hannibal, Missouri, a very small town up here on the Mississippi, and he was a humorist, a journalist, a lecturer, and he was also a steamboat captain or a pilot. This is not a steamboat. This is a tour boat, but it looks something like this: paddle wheels that would run it, and the steam would make the engine turn the paddle wheels and go up and down. They go up and down the Mississippi River for one reason or another. He wrote his most famous writings were Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, which is considered to be one of the greatest American novels in all of American literature. And he was very, very funny. I'm going to share with you two quotes that I loved. He has thousands of them, but this is one of my favorites here. For an example, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat two frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. I love that one. He also said, there are basically two types of people who have accomplished things and people who have claimed to accomplish things. The first group is less crowded.
Okay, and then now I'll tell you a little bit about the geography of Missouri. Missouri has many rivers which give it good farmland in the flat rural areas. Crops are predominantly corn and soybeans. So the flatter land tends to be around toward the north, some of the central areas. Missouri also produces huge numbers of hogs, pigs, as well as chickens and turkeys. Many immigrants work in the meat processing plants, and they help pick apples in the apple orchards of Missouri. Missouri has the Mississippi River, the Missouri River, there's the Merrimack River, and many other rivers down in this part of the country. Forest and hilly areas cover much of the lower area, middle and southern areas of Missouri. Hunting for deer, turkey, and other wildlife is very popular. The Mark Twain Forest in the south is mostly wilderness with very low population and only a few smaller towns, often near rivers for camping and canoeing. In the 1800s, the hilly area around Hermann, Missouri, sort of in the center of maybe 2 hours from Missouri, from St. Louis is Hermann, Missouri. And the hills reminded the German settlers of their homeland. So they planted vineyards, and they've long produced award-winning wines. Did you know that Missouri saved the French wine industry? In the 1870s, France faced the Great French Wine Blight. It was caused by a parasite root infestation that had come from America. Missouri grapes roots were immune to this disease. So vineyards from 3 areas of Missouri sent 10 million root stocks to France, where they grafted French vines to the roots. Many Missouri rivers are fed by springs, so the rivers flow clear and cold, which is good for fishing, canoeing, and camping. Our huge Lake of the Ozarks was created by a hydroelectric dam between 1929 and 1931.
While Regina was talking about all that, I was noticing we have a couple of other pictures we could share. In the middle of the state, we have these caverns that were started, caves and caverns. That's the Merrimack Caverns, where people can go visit. These are the fantastic caverns, and there's stalactites and stalagmites, that kind of thing.
Elephant rock.
Okay. Yeah, and we also have geographic formations that are fun too.
Red granite.
Yeah, the red granite. And this is called Elephant Rock. See how these rocks look like elephants? I don't see it, but.
And they found mammoth bones in this area. Prehistoric mammoth bones.
So getting back to our map here. So we're going to be talking about some of these towns here. Here's St. Louis again, and we'll be talking about Kansas City, which is on the west side of the state. It would take, if you wanted to drive from one end of the state to the other, it would take about 5 or 6 hours, something like that, just to give you a sense. We'll be talking about Jeff City, which is the capital of Missouri, Springfield, which is down here, and
end with St. Louis.
Yeah, and we'll end with St. Louis. I'm getting prompted here. Okay, all right. So,
leave it there.
So this is. I'm going to talk about Kansas City though here now. Okay,
right.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about Kansas City here. Kansas City was known for its meat. There were cattle drives where cowboys would drive their cattle from Oklahoma up north and across the country, and there were stockyards here. The stockyards stopped in 1991, not too long ago. But that's one of the reasons why in Kansas City they're known for their barbecue, their meat. And I know Kyrgyz love their meat, and for good reason too, because I had some great meat while I was there. But in Kansas City, that's the case. That is the case as well. They have a museum there called the Nelson Atkins Museum, Art Museum, and this is how artsy it is. It's a big old shuttlecock here, which is kind of funny. I don't know if you're familiar with badminton, but it's a game, I think, that came from England or someplace like that. And they also have in Kansas City, they have a museum called the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. It used to be the case that back in the 1800s, that African Americans started playing baseball on company teams and on the military, and they eventually made their way to the major leagues. But because there was racism at the time, as there is still now, the Negroes, as they were called back then, were forced to leave professional baseball and form their own leagues, which they did. And they traveled across the country and would play anybody who would challenge them. I'm just going to throw this little tidbit in here. Mickey Mouse. Walt Disney was born in Missouri. And so you could say that Mickey Mouse was born in Missouri as well, from Marceline, Missouri. And this is his childhood home museum. Okay.
Okay, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the capital of Missouri, Jefferson City. And it's located about 2 hours from St. Louis, Jefferson City, and then I'll tell you about Columbia, Missouri, which is right next to it. Capital city of Missouri is Jefferson City, is a small town of 40,000 people along the Missouri River. The nearby town of Columbia has a population over 125,000. There you'll find the main campus of the University of Missouri, or they call it Mizzou, with over 30,000 students that come from all the U.S. states and over 100 countries. It is the main campus of the University of Missouri system. It is famous for its School of Journalism, and one benefit is the students are surrounded with the Midwestern sort of non-accent that's standard for radio and TV news announcers in the United States. You don't hear New York accent or Brooklyn accents or Southern accents very often. What's next?
Shall we show that one?
Sure. This is kind of funny. Probably throughout not only rural areas, but cities, you'll see lots of food. And when we were young, you didn't see this kind of piled up hamburger, but somewhere over time, they started adding bacon and double cheese and all kinds of extra fried onions. So you see why quite a few Americans or Missouri are fat.
Overweight, yes.
A little overweight.
We eat half of a cow, it looks like, between two pieces of bread. So, you want to talk about?
And then comes Springfield.
Springfield, okay.
Okay, and then Springfield is located in southern Missouri. It's about 3 hours from Springfield, another hour to get to Oklahoma. It's one of Missouri's largest cities with 168,000 population. It has the large campus of Missouri State University, which has 24,000 students, some from international. Students and visitors alike can go to the home of the First Bass Pro Shop in Springfield. A guy began selling fishing lures from his uncle's gas station way back. He was a champion fisherman, and he built a national store empire, the Bass Pro Shop, and the first one was in St. Louis. I'm sorry, in Springfield. Visitors to Springfield area can also eat at Lambert's Cafe, the home of Throwed Rolls. That's bad English. It should be thrown, but if you sat at your table, you just raise your hand, and a young high school baseball player who's a waiter would throw dinner roll across the room straight to you, and you could catch it. Sometimes it bounced around.
So buses, if I could just throw, so
Yeah.
tour buses traveling through Missouri stop at this place just so they can raise their hand when they're sitting down, raise their hand, and a high school pitcher would throw a roll all the way across the room and hit a strike
They were perfect.
every time.
If you didn't catch it, it was your fault, not
Yes,
them.
exactly.
Lots of fried food, as you can see, biscuits and gravy. Another bad sign of American food. Then a short drive from Springfield is Branson, Missouri, which is known as a mini Las Vegas. Especially older people come in full buses to see performances such as Western rodeos, famous singers, and even a Cirque du Soleil type show. It has a beautiful big lake. Show this one here. That's the strip that goes through town. Lots of neon signs. It has a beautiful big lake nearby for water sports and boat rides. And Springfield is on the old Route 66. This is the famous road called Route 66 that went west from Chicago through St. Louis and down to Oklahoma. Eventually, across the U.S., went west to a Los Angeles beach. Some pictures here of gas stations. This would have in the 30s, people went west to California, migrating west. And then in the 50s, they drove just to tour the United States after World War II. This is a car from the 50s.
Yeah, this road, Route 66, holds a lot of romance for Americans. There were television shows about it. Music was written about it. It's mostly gone. It doesn't exist much anymore. It's been replaced by an Interstate Highway 44. But you can, if you want to, find little strips of it all the way from here to literally. I'm gonna go back here. Like literally from here all the way through Oklahoma, all the way to Los Angeles, like this. And it holds a lot of romance for it because it was around the time that Americans discovered cars and they could be mobile and go anywhere, and they could go west all the way to Hollywood, where you could be in the movies, I guess, if you really prayed hard. Are we ready to move on to St. Louis?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to St. Louis, where we live. We live in St. Louis, which is right here. And St. Louis was founded where it was because it was good for the fur traders back when the city was first founded. So fur trappers could catch and animals that had fur and bring them back here and sell them down the Missouri River, and also from up north from the St. Louis, from the Mississippi River. Yes. Okay. So it's called the Gateway to the West. This arch here is considered to be a symbol of it being a gateway because it was the last stop before people went west to discover the rest of the country. But what I'm going to show you now, a lot of the pictures that we've been showing you are very beautiful pictures. And I want to create the impression that we are like the Emerald City, where Dorothy went to the Wizard of Oz, if you're familiar with that. I don't know if you are or not, but it tends to look that way because I used to do a lot of work for them. And when Eicherim asked me if I wanted to do this, I contacted my old buddies there, and they started sending me pictures of like this, which is a city garden. It's a garden in the middle of the city.
The sculptor.
Yeah, with sculptures and lights and
Water fountain.
and this is City Garden during the day. And St. Louis used to have railroads running through it all over the country. And this is our old rail station. It's now a mall. No trains go through it. There's Amtrak, which is a train that goes across the country. There's just a couple of them a week or something like that. But in the middle of it, they have a museum. They have an aquarium. I've never been myself. Have you been?
Shopping and restaurants. We haven't been to the aquarium yet. It's new. It's new.
Yeah. We also have the World Chess Hall of Fame. For those of you who are interested in chess, they have national, international championships here. People who teach chess at the world-class level have moved to St. Louis so they could teach people how to play chess. And here's a couple of folks playing them. We have an art museum in the middle of a park that's in the middle of the city. It's huge. It's actually bigger than Central Park, which is probably one of the most famous parks in the middle of cities. Central Park is in New York. But we have Forest Park. And in Forest Park, that's where we had a World's Fair about 100 years or so ago. Baseball is a big thing in St. Louis. We love our baseball. And they built the stadium such that when you're standing at home plate, you can look and see the arch just to remember where you are. We are the home of the St. Louis Cardinals. They are one of the winningest teams in all of baseball. They've won more World Series than any other team. And by the way, I'll point out that when we Americans talk about World Series, we're really talking about America and 2 cities in Canada when it comes to the world of baseball. We have a theater. This is an old movie palace where you can watch musicals and plays and also movies sometimes. It was built in the 20s. In Forest Park, you can go see live theater. It's called the Muni, short for Municipal Opera. We have a basilica. It took, 80 years to build. And these are all mosaics. They brought mosaics artists all the way from Europe in the last century to help build them.
Especially Italian. And it's built in the design of Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. But marble and mosaics from Italy.
I'll never forget one night, my wife and I, when we first moved here, hadn't been to it before. We said, let's go check it out. And the doors were open and we stepped into this big, beautiful cathedral. It's all empty. And she sneezed. And the sneeze just reverberated back and forth.
It's still an active Catholic cathedral.
Yes. You want to talk about WashU?
And Washington University is one of the major campuses in St. Louis. We have 7 or 8 large campuses, different colleges, some private, some state supported. Students come from all over the world, especially to Washington University, and they have a large medical school also.
We have an organization called, what's it called? The International,
It's 9:30.
I can't remember what it is. We're doing okay. Anyway, they help refugees and immigrants from around the world come here, and they help sponsor an international festival called Festival of Nations. And they celebrate people from around the world who've come from all over and can share their culture, including things like falafel and crafts. We also have a town, a little tiny town in St. Louis called The Hill. It's our Italian neighborhood where you can still buy Italian foods. It's called The Hill. and it has shops and restaurants in and around houses where mostly Italians live. It's the only one of its kind in the country. There used to be a Little Italy in New York, but it's now Chinatown, actually. So St. Louis has the only remaining Italian continuously lived in residential and business area in the country. We are famous for our ice cream, Ted Drew's, which is on Route 66, by the way, the old Route 66, where you can get a blueberry concrete. That's what they're called. They're so thick that they're considered to be like concrete. We were at one time, and still are, I'm not sure, one of the largest producers of beer in the world, Anheuser-Busch. We love our beer here in St. Louis. And I'm coming up on the end here, but I just wanted to show you, we have a market here. This is the largest food market in St. Louis that sells food from around the world. And my wife and I, when we were looking to move into a smaller place, when I saw where it was, because I would go there all the time, I love to cook, decided to move into a condominium right down the street from here. I can look out our bedroom and see Global Foods, where food from around the world can be purchased. And I go there all the time. You can see, you can even get noodles from, I don't know where they are. Maybe they're from Kyrgyzstan. I have no idea. But that's our tour of Missouri. And if you have any questions, we can take them now.
Great. Thank you very much, dear Frank and Regina, for this amazing journey to Missouri State. I think you can close the presentation in order to see yourself.
Oh, okay. All right.
Now I even can say that I was in Missouri. Thank you very much for your great presentation. We received a lot of questions. Now I think I can start to ask you. Question from Gulrukhajir. Thank you for such informative and interesting session. What is Missouri State song? And if you don't mind, can you sing it right now for us?
I don't know. I think there's a musical, it's like an old-fashioned waltz, country western waltz. What's it? Like an old fiddle with a fiddler and a waltz. I don't know. I have to look it up. Where's your phone?
She's going to look it up on my phone.
There might be a famous song, a Missouri State song, and a Missouri State music. So I have to see.
Well, I can say this is sort of related to it, is that ragtime music, which was one of the beginnings of jazz, was started by Scott Joplin, who lived in St. Louis. He wrote rags, some of the most beautiful music. And I don't know what our state song is, but if you heard any of his music, the ragtime music, people would immediately recognize it as being very important historically to the history of jazz in America. Did you find it?
I should have known this. It's called the Missouri Waltz. And it's like the beginning of the words are "Hush-a-bye, my baby, slumber time." So it's a waltz that began as a lullaby.
Great. Thank you very much, Frank and Regina. So we can move to the next question. You have mentioned, Frank, that you visited Kyrgyzstan. What are some other similarities between Kyrgyzstan and Missouri, except for meat?
That's good.
Well, we have Kyrgyz are some of the friendliest and most gracious people I've ever met in the world, and St. Louisans are friendly and gracious. But I think the Kyrgyz beat us in that department. We have hills and mountains, but they just don't compare to Kyrgyzstan. I mean, the Kyrgyz mountains. I hiked up into the memorial for the alpinists, and you could say that some of it kind of looks like Missouri, but much bigger in the Kyrgyz Republic. We have 4 seasons. You have 4 seasons, I believe.
Yes.
Little farmers markets here, but
Yes, we have markets, but nothing like the central market in Bishkek, one of the most amazing markets I've ever been to in my life. So you beat us. We have lots of similarities, but I feel like you beat us in all the important stuff.
Yes. Thank you very much, Frank, for your answer. So we can move to the next question. What places do you like to visit with Regina in St. Louis, Missouri?
oh, in St. Louis, the art museum, the zoo with our grandchild. We've been up on the arch. You can ride up to the top of the arch.
The Fox, we go to
The Fox Theater has plays and musical theaters come from Broadway. They tour. Saw Hamilton there. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Kirkwood Park, where the little town, St. Louis is a huge area of 2.5 million people, and there's the city and the county. We're in the county, so there's really nice parks that we like to go to in restaurant.
I mean, we go to probably the places that once you've been to the Arch, I mean, it's beautiful. It's nice to take guests there, but we never ourselves go there, although we should probably go there because they've improved it over the years.
Museum.
Yeah, the museums and so forth. But we are foodies. I don't know if you know that term in Kyrgyz, but we love to eat and I love to cook. And so when I'm not cooking and Regina's not cooking, we like to go to some of our favorite restaurants, which are Indian restaurants, Chinese restaurants. We have an Afghan restaurant here in town, which I love to go to with. We have Greek and Lebanese. We could talk about restaurants all day long.
And Mexican food. I was born in San Antonio.
Wow. So many great restaurants are there. Thank you very much, Frank and Regina. We received one wonderful comment. Frank and Regina, thank you for taking your time to talk about Missouri. I've lived in Columbia for 2 years during my studies at Mizzou. Your presentation brought so many good memories.
I have to. Can we ask that person a question?
Yes, sure.
So did they get a degree when they were at Mizzou?
She received master's degree. Yes.
Oh, a master's degree in what?
I think it's librarian studies. I hope so. She is one of our guest speakers, Jism Khan Ejia. She was, yes. She talked about her studies in the United States, about her master's degree.
Oh, okay.
That's great.
That's great. Good.
So we can.
Thank you for your question. That's great to know that that there's folks here who've been and gone back to Kyrgyzstan and can talk about it.
Great. So the next question for you: why do you want to become a filmmaker? Who inspires you for this profession, Frank?
Well, when I grew up, I didn't know what I wanted to be, so I just thought I wanted to be a teacher, and I didn't plan on becoming a filmmaker. But I tell this story. I didn't become a filmmaker until I was 35 years old when I quit my job from teaching, and the reason for it is this: I had a classroom. My classroom was above the principal's office, and it was a very, very noisy classroom. I didn't control my students very well. And at the end of the school year, the principal invited me into his office and he said, "Your classroom's too noisy. I can't get any work done. I'm going to move you down to the other end of the building." And he put me in the art department. And there I met a photographer, and he showed me what he was doing, and I loved it. And I said, "Could you show me how to take pictures and how to develop them and how to make them?" And so we became good friends. And it was then that I fell in love with it. I fell in love with photography. I knew I'd found my passion. And that's when my wife, one day she could tell I was miserable. She had a job. She said, "Quit your job, follow your dreams. We'll make it work." And so I was very thankful for her to do that. So over the course of time, I went from taking pictures to making movies. And it was an evolution. It took years to do that. And now I'm so thankful that I was thrown out of the school. And not really thrown out, but you know what I'm saying. And that my wife allowed me to support me in my dreams. And as she said, though, before, it's paid off because there are times when I made more money than she did. And but in the business of independent filmmaking, it's the money comes and goes. So it's nice to have a wife with a steady job.
Wow. Thank you very much, Frank.
And I've been so thankful that I could do this because I would have never been invited by American Film Showcase, and then in turn by the embassy in Bishkek, the U.S. Embassy, to come and share my film. So it's been a great experience, and I've loved every minute of it.
Yes. Wow, it's a great story. Thank you very much, Frank. And of course, Regina, you have become a source of inspiration for Frank. Wow, it was wonderful. And we have one more question.
One quick little correction. I think the New York Yankees would be mad at us. It's actually the Yankees won more World Series than the Cardinals baseball. You better correct that.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Dear Frank and Regina, what films and movies will you recommend to stay positive?
To stay positive. Wow. Oh, wow.
Gentlemen of Vision, Frank's film. Because St. Louis and Kansas City and other big cities in the United States have large Black populations that struggle with low income. I hope America is finally changing attitudes and will change laws and policies that will improve the lives of Black Americans. Housing and wage income, all of that has to improve. So I think Gentlemen of Vision shows teachers and counselors and young Black men improving and surviving in the midst of struggle, helping each other.
But unfortunately, it can stream if you're in the country. If you're in the United States, you can stream it, but it doesn't stream outside the country. So we can't recommend that movie to stay positive. Think of a movie that that people can watch to stay positive.
What do you get? Movies? Any documentary?
Netflix? Do you get Netflix?
Do you get Netflix?
Yes, we have Netflix. Some of our citizens pay for Netflix and watch movies there.
A recent one is on Fred Rogers. What was
Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Is that the name of the movie? There's a documentary on Fred Rogers who inspired parents and young children to have a positive outlook on life. And they made a movie with Tom Hanks just this last year or two. I think we saw it over December, January. So Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. There's older films I keep thinking of. I'm trying to think of some newer ones.
Probably the most positive American movie ever made is It's a Wonderful Life. It was made
In the 40s.
back in the 40s. Who starred in that one? Not Cary Grant, but
No.
but it's probably the most well-known American positive film. If you're looking for a positive film, it's a Wonderful Life. And I think you could probably watch it on YouTube. I'm not sure. It's a very, very positive movie, but it's dark. It gets dark, but then it gets super positive.
Well, and I think there are films with Jane Fonda,
What do you think?
and some of the women's that show Americans confronting maybe climate issues or the environmental pollution, where there are positive efforts to overcome problems, sometimes based on real people's stories. If you look at some of the movies with Jane Fonda and more recent ones, women's issues, feminist issues. 9 to 5 was a movie about when the women were trying to get rights in the office jobs. We'll keep thinking while we're talking.
I'd like to know what movies this person would recommend us to watch to be positive. That's a very good question, because that's an important thing for us right now to be thinking along these lines with the world we're living in.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much, Frank and Regina, for your recommendations. I hope that our viewers will find these movies and watch them. We can move to the next question. What does the name Missouri mean?
Oh, well, the name Missouri, it means town of long canoes. And that was the meaning of the tribe of Native Americans who lived here. They were called the Missouri. We call them the Missouri Indians in the old days, but now we refer to them as the tribe of Missouri, Native Americans, because they built long canoes.
With all of our big rivers, they had the long canoe.
Great. Thank you very much, Frank and Regina. One more question for Frank. Frank, are you planning to make a documentary about post-pandemic time after this virus crisis?
Well, I'm actually hoping to make a documentary in the middle of it. I was getting started to work on a documentary that was focused on North St. Louis, where we have a large African American population, and there's some good things going on up there. But then the pandemic came and everything stopped. But it seems like we're going to try to get that back on track. So I'm hoping that I don't want to have to wait until the pandemic is over with to finish it. I'll have my mask, I'll have my face shield, I'll have my hand sanitizer, and I'll go out into the field and start collecting footage. And I hope I can start doing that soon. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Frank. And the next question. Are there any legends related to Missouri State?
Legends? Wow, there's a lot of them, I'm sure.
Well,
that's a great question.
There's real people like Jesse James who hid out in the caves, a bad guy.
from during the cowboy era.
In the cowboy era.
Probably the most famous bad guy in Missouri history. Let's see. The Fox Theater is haunted. That's a legend. I was actually in the theater when I was a photographer taking pictures.
Keel.
Oh, it was another theater. That's right. It was
Kiel.
the Kiel. It was the Kiel. I was taking pictures and I was by myself and it was very dark. And I felt as though someone had snuck up to my side and puffed into my ear, and it really freaked me out. and I made a story about the history of that auditorium that told the ghost stories about it. And I heard that some of the people who worked there quit because they had the same experience, and that scared them enough to say, I'm not working here anymore.
Great.
I'm sure there's many more legends. I can't think of any.
Well, Harry Truman came from, the president after World War II, was from Missouri, near Kansas City.
Mhm.
Trying to think of any other famous people. Brad Pitt, famous actor, was born near Springfield, Missouri.
Mm. Great. Thank you very much, Frank and Regina. We received one interesting comment. Just for your information, the St. Louis Botanic Garden cooperates with the Botanic Garden in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan.
Oh,
Several years ago, the St. Louis donated many plants to Bishkek Garden. Now there is a piece of Missouri in the heart of Central Asia.
wow.
Amazing.
Wow, that is great. How long ago was that?
A couple of years ago.
I don't know. Maybe we will ask.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, the Missouri Botanical Garden is wonderful. We should have included a picture of that. Yes.
It's really great. Also, we have one more question for you. Are the entertainment places suffering during the pandemic now?
Yes, the theater and dance and the St. Louis Symphony is known worldwide. They're all trying to do a little bit virtual online, maybe little theater bits or music or dance, just to so people can see something and contribute to help. But it's really kind of scary times for the arts, for artists,
Yeah.
theaters, performers.
They're all suffering.
Yeah, they're all have been closed and will probably stay closed for the rest of the year. And we're waiting for the vaccine. That's the main thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's unfortunately a bad time for entertainment places. And Frank and Regina, what do you do to stay positive during this lockdown?
Well, this kind of thing. You know, I have done virtual filmmaking master classes. I came to Kyrgyzstan back in September to travel around the country and offer advice and show my movie on it. But one of the silver linings, as they say, with this pandemic is that the American Film Showcase is now offering expertise around the world virtually. So if it weren't for the American Film Showcase and the embassies and consulates around the world that have invited me since the pandemic broke out, I would probably be very depressed, but I've been very happy to keep busy sharing my filmmaking expertise in Moscow, in the United Arab Emirates, in Kazakhstan,
Mm-hmm.
and also in coming up, I'm going to be sharing and exchanging ideas with filmmakers in Abu Dhabi. So I think staying busy, finding meaning, whatever that is in your life, is for me, it's filmmaking and cooking. I love to cook. So those things.
We're actually keeping up with family and friends even a little more. We see them on FaceTime or Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
We see them more often, and not just a phone call. We've started using FaceTime to see. I have 4 brothers and sisters and his sister, and our friends, so that we would see maybe once a year or twice a year. Now we've seen them every other week with cocktail time.
It's
So that
wonderful.
helps. It really does help. And we
Yes.
keep busy with the grandchild, with 2 little girls now.
Wow.
We have a new baby born in May, our grandchild.
Wow. Congratulations. It's like new. Thank you very much, Virginia and Frank. We receive one more question. Could you please name your top 3 favorite movies?
Oh, geesh, I can tell you my top. Okay,
You know.
my most favorite movie of all time is Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. It came out in 1968. I fell in love with it. I still love that movie and that filmmaker. I would say, geez, Dr. Strangelove is another movie that Stanley Kubrick made. It's a black comedy, which means that it's very, very dark, but funny at the same time. Days of Heaven. I love Days of Heaven.
This is what my favorite is, the
Okay.
Intouchables. It's a French film, and they made an American version, but not as good as the original, with a young black guy who takes care of a paraplegic. Lots of humor and warm-hearted, just wonderful. And I'd have to say the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. There's been so many good documentaries about what people doing good things. I don't know if I have any other good documentaries, any
Yes.
favorites. It's hard to pick a favorite.
Yes.
Yes, it's really true to choose your favorite one among these wonderful movies.
If you look at the list of documentaries from Independent Lens, Public Broadcasting, the list of documentaries that they've shown on that TV series, you could maybe find some on Netflix.
Mhm. Great. Thank you very much, Frank and Regina. This was our last question for you. And now we are finishing our session. And it was a really interesting and wonderful session. And we are really happy to have you today. And on behalf of our viewers, I want to say thank you very much for your time and effort and for your great recommendations. And now I think it's time to close up our session.
Well, thank you so much, Ada, for hosting this. And I would like to thank Chopin and Igarim for inviting us here, and for everybody for tuning in, and particularly the U.S. Embassy in Bishkek for making this all possible. And this, it's coming from an American space. I love the American corners, the American spaces. I think what's going on in those spaces are wonderful. So thank you so much.
Goodbye and do svidaniya.
Yeah. And salamata balgula.
Bye-bye, everyone. Be safe and be kind, and see you in our next sessions. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.